Now, the right time with Bomani Jones on ESPN Radio.
And ESPNradio.com.
NBA free agency has begun, and whoo boy, it's a good day for you if you sell boats, because it's a bunch of dudes who can afford boats. It's dudes I've never heard of who now can afford boats. And when I say a boat, I don't mean just something you go out there and fish in. I'm talking about a yacht, man. Hey, Chris Middleton, do you know what he looks like? Do you know what team he plays for? Do you know where he went to college? Do you know what position he plays? I don't know any of these things. Well, I know these things. I know some of you guys don't know them. I didn't know these things 3-4 months ago. That dude got 5 years, $70 million. $70 million. I swear to you, I had never heard of this dude 5 months ago. Like, maybe that's my bad, right? Because I'm not saying he doesn't deserve the money. I'm just saying that there's a dude named Chris Middleton who can go buy a yacht now. Good for you, Chief. Good for you. Like, look at this money these dudes are racking up. And what's crazy about it, this is the money that these dudes are racking up after the Players Association got their keisters handed to them in the last negotiation. You remember that? They had to run out the leadership of the Players Association. Look at this bread these dudes are getting. Yo, everything has changed. Like, it's not as though cats weren't getting bread before. Don't get me wrong. But do you realize Iman Shumpert's getting $10 million a year? Yeah, Iman Shumpert, the one who plays for the Cavs. That's right. Let me tell you, I forget who gave this line to me one time about where you go sign and where to play or wherever, and talking about championships. It's like, yeah, if you don't win a championship, I might not ever make the Hall of Fame, but I can be a legend at the bank. If there's any place you want to be a legend, you want to be a legend at the bank. And a whole lot of these dudes are about to be legends at the bank. Good for them. Damian Lillard, 5 years, $120 million. You're about to be a legend at the bank. Good for you. But nobody's going to be a legend at the bank like Anthony Davis is going to be a legend at the bank. Anthony Davis got a contract, 5 years, $145 million. That's the contract extension he got. And that was announced by Adrian Wojnarowski at Yahoo Sports at 12:01, okay? He announced this at 12:01. And people were in my Twitter mentions talking about it's amazing how they can negotiate these big contracts so fast. I don't know why it took until 12:01 to negotiate Anthony Davis's contract. You want the max? Yeah. All right, then. Boom. Right there. Right there. What was that, 3 seconds? Like, that's all that took. There was no negotiation involved there. Like, if you're Anthony Davis's agent, you spend all your time worrying on getting him shoe deals and stuff like that, because the NBA deals are taken care of for the foreseeable future. When Anthony Davis is 25 years old, Anthony Davis is going to be making in the neighborhood of $30 million. Yo. Give that young man a round of applause. And I imagine this, right? Like, I'm just thinking out of my head, like, if there was a commercial that young man should do at this moment, right? Think about it like after the Super Bowl. You know, after the Super Bowl MVP is there, and they run up on him, and they're like, Super Bowl MVP, you've just won Super Bowl MVP. What are you going to do? And the guy responds, I'm going to Disney World, right? Now, Anthony Davis needs to have another one. Anthony Davis, you just signed the richest contract in the history of professional basketball. Where are you going to go? I'm going to the cell phone store. And you know why I'm going to the cell phone store? Because there's nothing in this world at the moment that I signed a $150 million contract that they told the world about in the newspaper. There's no place that I need to go before I go change my telephone number. Oh, yeah. You got to take real careful inventory of your life at that moment, because, like, some things have got to change. Now, look, Anthony Davis has already made this money, right? Like, he's already been making NBA money. He's been making millions of dollars. So it's now past the point of, like, hearing from the people who just need to hold a little something, right? It's past that point. Like, the people that need to hold a little something from him, he's been heard from them, right? That comes at first. I mean, look, this is how it goes. Once people know that you have some money, those people are going to come and they're going to ask you for money. Like, it's not necessarily going to be a line of people asking you for money, but it's always going to be people who are asking you for money. Why? Because it's always going to be people who need money. And when you need money, where do you go? You go somewhere where you know that there's money. Right? So, like, you could go to the bank, but most people ain't going to the bank and walking out with money. I mean, most people don't really have that sort of situation there. Credit ratings, man, they're low all over the place, right? So if you the dude with money, people are going to come to you for money, okay? So the people that need, my car just broke down and I just need to hold a little something till the end of the month, and you're never going to pay them back because Anthony Davis ain't never going to ask them. Like, those people are already around. And in 3 years, I think Anthony Davis has probably managed that situation. And, he's got the list of people he's willing to save from eviction, right? That's how it goes. Like, once people figure it out that you got a little something, that's what it's going to be, okay? He's already got those people in his life. Dog, Anthony Davis just hit for about $30 million a year, okay? $30 million a year. He's about to hear from everybody, okay? Everybody. Like, there are some people out there who knew that Anthony Davis was making some money. He's a basketball player. But once people find out that you're making $30 million, now the whole scope of what you can ask for has changed, right? Like, I'm sure there's plenty of girls who knew Anthony Davis in high school, and they wasn't giving him no play, and then Anthony Davis became the number one pick in the draft. They're like, hey, good for Anthony. He was always very nice, and then they were friendly with Anthony Davis. Well, Anthony Davis is making $30 million a year now. All of a sudden, the tenor of those conversations is completely different. That's when you start hearing about it's crazy when I look back, and I was in high school, and, I just didn't know. Like, I used to spend all that time with you, and I just didn't have any idea that you were going to grow into, like, such a provider, and, like, I always thought you was cute and everything. All those people are about to pop up for Anthony Davis, every single one of them. Like, his whole day-to-day, if he did not go change his number, his whole day-to-day was all kinds of people hitting him up with messages. And every message that somebody's hitting him up with, they try to make it sound as familiar as possible. They hitting them messages like, I see you, big dog. Right? Man, look how far you done come. I remember back in the day when we used to play ball and you wasn't even that good, man. Like, everybody's giving those messages. Man, when I used to sit next to you in chemistry class, I knew something good was going to happen for you. Like, he's going to hear from every single one of these people. Only thing you can do at this point is change your telephone number, right? Change your telephone number. And I got to say this, too, for Anthony Davis before we go to this commercial break. He appears to be a real cool dude, and that's good for him, right? And you know why I say that's good for him? Because he is absolutely the dude that would be in danger of being on the Mike Jones. Back then, they didn't want me. Now I'm hot. They all own me. Like, have you seen the picture of Anthony Davis when he was 15 years old in those rec specs? Look, yeah. Look up some Anthony Davis pictures in high school. Like, this all came around real fast for him to get to the point that he's reached, right? He was out there hooping in the rec specs, just a regular old dude before he grew, right? Hey, man, I know how that situation goes. When you're the young dude when you're in school, people think you young all the way out. Anthony Davis is going to hear from everybody he ever went to high school with after $30 million. Every single one. And he's going to be surprised how many of them had crushes on him but just didn't know how to tell them, right? But he could have easily been that dude. Like, there's no way 15-year-old Anthony Davis could have ever imagined that this would be life for 22-year-old Anthony Davis. Like, I'm happy for the dude. Good for him. Because he's made it work, he put it on the grind, and he became the basketball player that he is. But you go look up those pictures of 15-year-old Anthony Davis. He never, ever could have seen it go like that. And neither could a whole lot of those people that's about to be hitting him up like, hey, bruh, now that you got some money, now we can really do some big things. You know I'm an entrepreneur, right?
Bomani.
Cavaliers spending all the money, bruh. All the money. Tristan Thompson, he's about to get broke off. Iman Shumpert, he just got paid by the Cavs. Kevin Love, 5 years, $110 million. And, of course, they'll have to pay LeBron. Dan Gilbert, if there is any price that he is paying for writing that letter, it is being paid in the amount of the luxury tax. Because I feel like all this money he's spending, he's coming to LeBron and saying, how high? How high? Because that's the only thing that he really has to say to him. You know what I mean? How high? That's it. Because LeBron's the guy that's in charge. Now, I don't know if they're necessarily spending all this money the right ways. So I figure, their lineup with Love, Thompson, LeBron, Kyrie, and I think it was J.R. Smith, was something like 116 points per 100 possessions, right? They can score a lot of points. It'll be curious to see how that lineup does in the postseason when it comes down to trying to stop people. That's always been the concern that I've had, is that Tristan Thompson goes to the 5, but I feel like Tristan Thompson gives you a lot as a guy that can defend on the perimeter, but I don't want him as the guy protecting the rim. They got Mozgov because they didn't have somebody that could protect the rim, right? So they have Mozgov coming off the bench, but you can't play those 3 guys at the same time. Like, I don't know if the way that Cleveland's invested their money is necessarily the right way to go about it, but damn if they ain't trying. And they are going to try. Like, they're going to be able to score a whole lot of points, and they are going to do whatever it is to show LeBron that they are putting in the effort, that they are just trying. Like, in Miami, one of the problems LeBron had was, they weren't signing the people they wanted them to sign. They weren't adding those guys, really. Hey, show LeBron you're busy. You know what I mean? That'll get you stuff. Show LeBron that you're busy. And that's what they're going to do. And that's what they're rolling with. Now, Kevin Love is interesting. I said that Kevin Love had that meeting with the Lakers, and that if Kevin Love went and he had that meeting and he decided to leave, I would understand it. I think that 26 years old is too young to be chasing championships if you're not happy in the place that you're in. Now, if I were 26, I probably would have done the thing about chasing the championships, right? Like, this is just kind of, being a little bit older. Not like I'm old or anything, just being a little bit older. I would recommend to take the happiness there. Now, if Kevin Love is happy in Cleveland that way, then this is fantastic for him. Like, if that's the place that he wants to be and LeBron wants him there, then that's what's up. I thought that if he talked to the Lakers, there's a possibility he could make it work. But apparently the Lakers aren't really good at meetings. We'll talk about that more a little bit later, but they seem to struggle with meetings. They don't ever seem to go these days the way that they want them to go. But Kevin Love in Cleveland, if he's happy, then, hey, he has a chance to win those rings. He has a chance to get that feeling, and he got that taste of the finals and didn't get to play. He ain't getting out with the Lakers no time soon. So it doesn't sound like that was a bad move for him necessarily. I don't think that he could lose. The part that I found to be interesting, though, for him, for Jimmy Butler, for a lot of these guys in the league, the television money is about to explode, but it's going to explode next year. Right? I thought you would see guys who were doing like LeBron did, basically, and signing those shorter deals, right, to get paid. It hasn't happened. Like, these dudes are taking the 5. And I think a big part of why they're taking the 5 is it's really hard to have somebody pass a piece of paper over to you that says that we're going to pay you $90 million and for you to reply and be like, no. Like, think about what you would do right now if somebody offers you $90 million. I'm not even telling you what you have to do for the $90 million. What you going to do for the $90 million? And I can tell you that there's a chance that in a year that you could get $130 million, right? $130 million. You got a chance to get that in about a year. But you can get this 90 right now. The 90 right now or a chance at the 130. Yo, dudes are more risk averse than I thought. They taking the 90. That's what they're doing. They're taking the 90. I don't blame them, right? It's not a matter of what is or isn't smart. It's just about, do you have it in you to walk away from $90 million? And I do not. Like, I was thinking about this with Anthony Davis's contract, right? Offer me $145 million for the rest of my life. Like, that's the term of the contract. $145 million, rest of my life. That's the term. So I'm 34 years old. I'll be lucky if I get another 50 years, right? I'll be lucky if I get another 50 years. $145 million, that's $2.9 million a year for 50 years. So, yeah, you can have me for the rest of my life for $2.9 million. Who can have me? You. You can have me for the rest of my life for $145 million. $2.9 million a year. You, damn it, you can have me for the rest of my life. I'll ask all the questions when I get there. Every single one of them, all right? So these dudes are taking the money.
Bomani.
All guests join us on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline, including our next guest. He is the author of The Extra 2%, a book on the Tampa Bay Rays that you got to check out. He's also got his new book out called Up, Up, and Away. Well, Jonah Carey, is the new book out, or am I getting a little ahead of myself there?
The new book is out. It's the entire history of the Montreal Expos, which sounds incredibly obscure and ridiculous, except that it's really fun. And if you want to know what Ellis Valentine was getting down to in the 70s, then we've got all that stuff for you and a lot more.
All right, now I've got Jonah on because Jonah is a huge basketball fan. He knows a lot about baseball, and he's written about finances. So something interesting is happening in the sports world that seems crazy. You saw Anthony Davis gets the giant contract. We're at a point now where baseball players are getting a lower percentage of revenue in a non-salary cap sport than basketball players are. We never thought that this would be such a thing, especially after the players took a bath in the CBA. Jonah, what in the world is going on here?
Well, it really has to do with, well, anyway, the innocent explanation of this is that it has more to do with revenue going nuts on the TV side and no obvious way to fix it on the player side, which is to say for a while, in fact, we can quantify this. In 2002, there was a report and the players were making 58% of total revenue and the owners were making 42. 58 to 42 was by far the biggest split in favor of players in all sports. And so it's like a very favorable position for players to be in. What's happened since then is we've got these giant mega TV deals. Of course, the Dodgers signing an $8 billion local TV deal. Many other teams signing $4 billion or more. We've got the national deal is gigantic. And there hasn't been necessarily an offset, a counterbalance to make players make more of the percentage. So 58-42 in favor of players as of 2002 today, 58-42, exactly the opposite in favor of owners.
Wow. Now, we're talking to Jonah Carey. You catch him at Grantland.com. He's also the author of The Extra 2% and Up, Up, and Away. I think it staggered people when they saw the numbers that Anthony Davis was getting, 5 years, $145 million on the extension. That's more year per year than a guy like Mike Trout is getting. So are we at a point now where we'll stop referring to big contracts as baseball money and now they're basketball money?
I sort of, kind of. It depends. I mean, the Trout comparison is not quite perfect because baseball has this system where they drag salaries for the first 6 years, basically. You have to go through, and you know this, of course, but you have to go through arbitration and then ultimately get to free agency before you become eligible for the open market. And you might not get to the open market in some cases until you're almost 30 years old. Trout is already the best player in baseball and has been since he pretty much entered the league. And so they gave this guy a ton of money, even though they could have theoretically paid him less, just to try to retain a little bit more of his prime. But you could see teams start to balk a little bit at giving up gigantic money for free agents who are older, and it creates a situation where the balance does tip a little bit toward the NBA. So, it gets tricky. It's not exactly apples to apples as to when a guy can make money, but I agree with you that it's definitely starting to go a little bit more toward basketball, especially with the nature of the cap rising. The Anthony Davis contract, pretty interesting, doesn't even start until next year, of course, and just a ton of money.
Well, you mentioned something interesting. You said that in baseball we've seen the surge of money on the television side and no way to really correct that on the player side. When you say there's no way really to correct it, why is it look, baseball players have gotten all this money for so long and they've had this strong union. How is that union now not able to find a way to allow their players to experience these riches?
Well, and I should clarify, I mean, they were not able to correct it in the last few years. Now there's a new CBA coming out next year, new collective bargaining agreement. So at that point, they have the ability to do that. All these things have to be negotiated. The players just can't say tomorrow, okay, we want another 5%, and then magically it happens. It has to be negotiated. So, it's possible that there could be some remedy that's done. And I have been very much against any kind of cap. It's an interesting, I love when you pitch this idea to me to come on and talk about it, because I'm anti-cap because I believe that it creates a drag on salaries. And in fact, as you said, at the highest level, that's not necessarily the case anymore, at least when compared to the NBA. Certainly the case when compared to the NHL, but the NHL doesn't have as much money. So, it's not an easy thing to do. Do you put in a cap and see what happens? And some players are going to end up making probably less money, quite frankly, when that happens. But then some others might make more. Plus, if you put in a salary floor, then you might see teams like, the Marlins, for example, and the Astros up until this year didn't spend any money. They might spend more. So it's not necessarily cut and dried. As I said, I'm generally against the cap because I just think that it's ultimately a tool that's used mostly to put money in the hands of the owners rather than in the players. But if there was some way to somehow make it equitable, that it isn't the case, that it's not dragging salaries, that it's more just to kind of keep things in line, then at least I could be a little bit open-minded about it.
We're talking to Jonah Carey of Grantland.com, also the author of the Extra 2% and Up, and Away. The cap is interesting to me because it almost creates a sort of psychological effect, right? That once the cap is there and everybody knows the cap is there, there's kind of a pressure for teams to then either spend up to the cap or be exposed as cheapskates. Like in baseball, because teams have such different situations with their markets and their TV deals, every team kind of has a different number they can point to and say, this is reasonable for us, right?
Yeah, that's definitely true. And teams, in every sport, notoriously lie. They claim that they're not making profits. Every sports team is profitable. They are lying liars if they try to tell you otherwise. There's so much TV money. I mean, I mentioned hockey not being as good a shape, but still, name your team, the Columbus Blue Jackets or whoever. Everybody's making money right now. It's the case in baseball. It's the case in basketball. I will say one thing which I didn't really touch on before, which I probably should have. Part of this whole split between baseball and basketball that's happening right now, in that basketball players can make a lot of money even though there is a cap, has to do with the fact that basketball is a more lucrative sport than baseball right now. Basketball national TV contract is bigger, and the revenue pool as a whole is just larger in basketball than baseball. So that's going to necessarily create a little bit of a different environment when it comes to salaries. Not to say that baseball teams are poor. They're obviously doing great, but it's not quite to the same extent as the explosion that we've seen in NBA spending as the sport has gotten more and more popular.
So is the national television deal really that important? And the reason I ask that is baseball, every team has 162 inventory of 162 games, right? 162 television shows that they could put on. One would think that would bring in the sort of revenue that would be necessary.
Well, sure. And it's not to say that that the baseball teams cannot pay guys. And the difference maker, of course, is the local deal, because if you have a national deal, obviously that's split 30 ways. So it helps. It's kind of a rising tide for all ships, so to speak. But in terms of the differences, the reason that you see such a difference between, let's say, the Dodgers and the Marlins, for example, again, is that the Dodgers have an $8 billion local TV deal. The Pittsburgh Pirates right now, I believe they're making $15 million a year. The Dodgers are making $340 a year. $340. So even when you pay out revenue sharing, you pay a third of that. You're still making what's that? $225. And then the Pirates are getting one tiny sliver of the $100-odd million that goes into the revenue sharing pool. So it's never going to be equal in that way. And that's something that I would like to see addressed. I mean, this becomes sort of a difficult situation to maneuver as well, because obviously you want more revenue sharing. You'd like the Pirates and the Rays and the Marlins to be able to spend a little bit more money, at least something in the ballpark of the Dodgers. But by the same token, the owners of the Dodgers would say, hey, dude, I spent $2.15 billion to acquire this franchise with the understanding that it would be more lucrative. Can we go back and rip up my contract and I'll pay a third of that, and then we can redo the rules? So it's sort of this institutional thing where if you're the owner of the Yankees or the Dodgers or whatever, you paid your entry fee, the entry fee was higher. To suddenly change the rules becomes very problematic.
All right, we're talking to Jonah Carey of Grantland.com. You mentioned that in the last CBA, the Players Association was not able to really get their hands on this TV money as it comes in. When the next negotiation comes around, it's been 20 years since we've really seen this Players Association bare its teeth. Is it possible that could happen then?
That's not the sense that I get, just, kind of with my sources in the game. Tony Clark is the new leader of the union, and he doesn't seem to be the kind of person who's going to necessarily pick a fight. The excellent Howard Bryan of ESPN spoke to Tony recently. I believe there's a piece coming out in ESPN, the magazine, soon, I want to say about that, with an interview with Tony. And we'll see. He doesn't have a long track record, so it's possible that he could change as the CBA starts to get negotiated. But I don't get the sense that it's a dig-in-your-heels kind of thing necessarily as it was with, Donald Fear or some other people who really were fighting tooth and nail for every little bit. So that could be an interesting kind of thing, to see how that goes. If you think back to the genesis of free agency, and just the union in general. This goes back to Marvin Miller, and the players were treated like chattel. I mean, they were the property of teams, and they were completely at the whims of teams, and nothing could happen. And there was a famous case in 1975 that established free agency. But let's go back further and talk about one of the most influential sports figures ever in Curt Flood. Curt Flood, not only a great ball player, but really kind of a hero for the rights of all athletes, in the sense that he went to bat and said, listen, this is not fair. We need to do something about this. Not only salaries, but pensions were out of whack. Everything was messed up. And that ultimately paved the way for the system that we have now. So, we're arguing about, NBA this and MLB this, but it's a matter of degrees. It used to be that these guys made just a tiny fraction of what they were worth, and even more importantly, they had no freedom. I mean, we're sitting here in America, and you can't choose where you want to work. That's pretty messed up.
I got to tell you, man, the worst thing about that 1994 strike was we lost the union that we had. Like, they had officially reached a tipping point on public opinion, and the mean, lean fighting machine that we used to have is just kind of like, we kind of need to make a deal as soon as possible.
Well, and it's so frustrating. Oh, God, we could go on forever about the 94 strike. You and I both had a dog in the race, you being a Braves fan, I was an Expos fan. That would have been a terrific race, just on its own. But there were a lot of things that happened. And one of the things that's so frustrating to me, is the way that it went down, that the teams were basically arguing for revenue sharing. That's what was happening. Teams like the Expos said, this is no fair. The Yankees make all this money. We get nothing. And they couldn't do anything. If you couldn't draw fans to your ballpark, TV deal wasn't what it was. You desperately needed revenue sharing. So the owner said, no problem. And this is where I get really upset about the salary cap. At the time, they said, no problem. We'll cap salaries, and we'll make sure that we'll take it basically out of your hides. The idea was for players to make less money. That was a direct quote, a direct desire of theirs, was that the cap was going to be there to take money away from the players and put it in their owners' pockets, and that's how we'll fund revenue sharing. And my thought was, any reasonable person's thought was, no, it should be the case that if you are New York, you have to pay in a little bit to make Montreal or whoever able to survive in the league. The Yankees can't play 162 games against themselves. There's no competition at that point. So they go to, they're talking about this and they're negotiating, and the players are making perfectly valid points. And the owners finally say, screw you, we're not going to do anything. The players go on strike, and it gets kind of thrown on their head why the season was canceled. But in reality, they had no choice, because it was, this thing was going to be untenable with the different markets going the way they were. And the owners absolutely insisted on taking it out of the players' hides. So they come back to 1995. The owners, by the way, tried to put scabs in instead of the players. That's a whole other problem. Then finally the season restarts. How does it restart? The owners say, okay, I agree to it. That's fine. We'll just do revenue sharing. No problem. So they went through all this trouble. They canceled the 1994 season when my favorite team, their one chance that they had to do anything in baseball, they were the best team in baseball that year, the best record, and the season gets canceled because the owners are being completely frivolous and ridiculous. I mean, it's just so annoying and frustrating, and there are many reasons that I tend to side for the union as opposed to management when it comes to baseball or sports disputes, but 94 is really, really one of them.
Quiet as is kept, we're talking about Bud Selig here. Bud Selig, Great Lakes guys, we're talking about you guys. That's who we're talking about. That's who we're talking about. Joe DeCarey, Grantland.com. Check out his books, The Extra 2% and Up, Up, and Away. My man, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Bomani. I appreciate it.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
NBA free agency has been fast and furious, man. The money flying all over the place. People out here getting paid. People you never heard of getting 8 figures per year, and I ain't even mad at him. I can't imagine anything better in this world than getting 10 figures per year and nobody actually knowing who you are, right? Like, that's the way to do it. You want to be rich in a way that allows you to still be able to walk through the mall. Like, my dream job in life is to be a ghostwriter for rappers. That's the living. All of the money, none of the fame, right? So when I say a guy I've never heard of him and he has all that money, I actually think that he's kind of won the game of life, even if he wants people to know who he is. Anyway, so lots of players have been winners in free agency. LaMarcus Aldridge will ultimately be a winner. He has effectively been the most pursued free agent that is available, and he did his first meeting last night with the Los Angeles Lakers, right? And I have been talking for days and for weeks about how the Lakers remain a glamour franchise. And there will always be, guys will always have interest in going to play for the Los Angeles Lakers, because who would you rather play for than the Lakers, right? Like, unless you grew up hating them, who would you rather play for? Who would it be most fun to be a basketball player? Like, on what team would it be most fun to be a basketball player? And I just can't imagine it's any more fun than it is being on the Lakers. It's like playing for the Cowboys in football. I can't imagine it's any more fun to be a football player than playing for the Cowboys. And I feel the same way about the Lakers. Except the Lakers ain't been able to sign anybody recently, right? They couldn't sign Dwight Howard. They didn't make that one work. Last year, they came back with nothing but something very important in their hands, but not a free agent, right? And then this year, apparently, they blew it in their presentation to LaMarcus Aldridge. This is from Mike Bresnahan of the Los Angeles Times. He said, look, he wanted the Lakers to wow him. He left turned off. The first thing that's mentioned in turning him off, apparently the Lakers had a lack of analytics in their presentation. Right. Said he had a whole lot of questions and everything else, but they didn't have the analytics in the presentation. He wasn't impressed with what they were talking about with the basketball. Now, the problem with the Lakers is that I don't know what analytics they were supposed to present to LaMarcus Aldridge to wow him. And you know why I say that? Because, like, what analytics could they bring that would say anything other than, we sorry right now, but we think we're going to get better? Like, what? That I do want to know. What analytics was LaMarcus Aldridge looking for? Because look, I haven't looked at the advanced numbers on the Lakers, but I don't need to look too far on the advanced numbers on the Lakers to know that they sorry, right? And they'll probably be sorry again this year. And LaMarcus Aldridge, quite honestly, is not the player that you put on a sorry team and all of a sudden they win 50 games. But right now they sorry. And LaMarcus Aldridge, that's all they could have had was a sheet of paper that says, I'm sorry, we sorry. But then something else happened. All right? Now, guys, I told you this last night. When I heard that Kobe was going to be at the meeting to recruit LaMarcus Aldridge, what did I say? If I were the Lakers, I would have told Kobe to go to the wrong restaurant. All right? He's not a people person. He doesn't really understand what the point of a recruiting visit is. Because you're trying to recruit, Kobe out here trying to spit that reel. Except it's like a real postmodern sort of reel, in the sense that it's the idea that, you know, everybody's got their own truth. Like, you know how people like to say there's three sides to every story, right? Nah. There's really one side to every story. People on all the other sides just lie, okay? So anyway, Kobe's in the meeting, and when Kobe was met with Dwight Howard on this recruiting, he gave Dwight this speech about, come here, let me teach you how to be a champion. He basically treated a grown man like a child. And I know your argument is going to be that Dwight comports himself as a child, perhaps, but Dwight did not want to be treated as a child, and the Lakers wanted Dwight to come. So what did Kobe do? Treat Dwight like a child. Boom. Dwight's out of there. All right? Now, I don't know how much better Dwight would have made the Lakers, and it's probably good that he's not there, because he's not the Dwight Howard of 2009 or 2010, which means he would have been savaged by Lakers fans for basically being Dwight Howard, right? Anyway, what did Kobe tell LaMarcus Aldridge, okay? Now, keep in mind again that at one point Kobe had said about Dwight Howard that he could be for us what Tyson Chandler is for the Mavericks, knowing that Dwight wanted to go somewhere where somebody would give him the ball. Anyway, this is from the L.A. Times again. Mike Bresnahan. Aldridge, who turns 30 in 2 weeks, also failed to connect with Kobe Bryant, who spoke for about 3 minutes at the presentation. Bryant said he envisioned Aldridge working with him in the same way Pau Gasol did, a message that apparently fell flat, though Lakers officials were quick to defend Bryant. Listen to what the quick defense was, and I quote, "It wasn't his fault at all." Okay, maybe it wasn't Kobe's fault. But you can't tell me that Kobe saying, maybe you could play with me like Pau Gasol did, was going to be the moment that turned things back in your favor. Why do you keep inviting Kobe to these things? What do you think Kobe's going to do? Like, do these dudes really just want to meet Kobe Bryant? Like, is that what it is? Is that like, cats like, yo, man, I watched Kobe when I was a kid, man. I just want to meet Kobe. Because Kobe seems to come in there, and he just doesn't make anything better. Remember I told you the story last night? Well, maybe you didn't because you probably weren't listening. Anyway, I told a story last night about a buddy of mine who was talking to another dude who worked at the same company as him, and the dude told him, and he was like, you know, I see me and you as the Jordan and Pippen of this place. And my man's response was, wait a minute, who's Pippen? Right? You're telling LaMarcus Aldridge, after you've missed like 2 seasons and when you played last season, you had negative win shares. Yeah, I've seen that advanced number for the Lakers, right? Had negative win shares, which is to say that Kobe was hurting more than he was helping. And he just told LaMarcus Aldridge, you can ride shotgun with me. Did Pau Gasol ever look really happy to you doing that, by the way? Did that look like a fun job for Pau Gasol? Like, is that what you want to hear on a job interview? I'm going to treat you like Kobe treated Pau. What? What are you doing? Why? Why would you do that? Why would you say that? We want him to come. Not only do we want him to come, we kind of want you to leave. Right. Now, Bresnahan also said on Twitter that LaMarcus Aldridge didn't get some of the information that he needed to get from Kobe Bryant. And look, there's only one piece of information that he needed to get from Kobe Bryant. When are you leaving? Like, really? When are you leaving? That's the piece of information that needs to be had. Now, I do think it's very interesting, though, that if the Lakers just didn't have the analytics that LaMarcus Aldridge was looking for, the question is, do they have the capability of producing these analytics? Because one thing to remember about the Lakers consider themselves to be a family business. Like Jerry Buss, I mean, to the end was flying Southwest Airlines, right? Southwest, okay? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Southwest. I'm just saying that Jerry Buss was out here flying on every man for himself seating, okay? That's how the Lakers get down. If you like somebody, you call that being a family business. If you don't like them, you call that being cheap. We agree on that, I think, right? Like, are they up to snuff in those areas that you need to be up to snuff? That would be the thing that would worry me about not having that stuff for LaMarcus Aldridge. It's like, do you have it in the first place? Now, if they have it in the first place and they didn't bring it, it's because it wasn't telling the story that they wanted to tell. I get that. Like, they need to walk in the door like, dog, we are sorry right now, but we are going to get better, and this is going to be great. Apparently, the Lakers they oversold all the other benefits of being in Los Angeles. Like LaMarcus Aldridge is stupid or something. Like, I know the benefits of being in Los Angeles. You know the benefits of being in Los Angeles. Like, I've interviewed for a job in Los Angeles. They didn't bother telling me about all those things because I'm not an idiot. Like, I know them. Like, if the best sell you got, if you're the Lakers, is we're Los Angeles, then you've got a problem. You've got a serious problem. The thing about that problem is Kobe in your presentation, not going to fix it.
Bomani.
All guests join us on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline, including our next guest. He's the host of the Lando Lakers podcast. You also find him at ESPN LA 710. He and his brother Brian have been kind enough to have me on their podcast many, many times, so it is my privilege to have Andy Kamenetsky on with us on the right time. My man, how are you?
Good, man. How you been? Long time no talk.
Yeah, man, just trying to pay these bills. By the way, you can follow the Kamenetsky brothers at Cam Brothers on Twitter. That's K-A-M Brothers at Cam Brothers. So the Lakers, what's going on, man? Like, they blew it with LaMarcus Aldridge. How does that happen?
Well, apparently
the meeting was too much fixated on what Los Angeles can bring for you, the opportunities that can come from being in a market like L.A., everything that comes with being a Laker, and I'm sure the history and the heritage and all that, and not enough about the actual basketball, which seems to be a pretty big deal for LaMarcus Aldridge at this stage of his career, turning 30. He's never been to the Western Conference Finals. He's looking to get a championship, and the Lakers apparently really underwhelmed him when it came to things that actually would take place on the court.
Well, just curious, what could the Lakers tell him?
Well, that's actually where it gets really tricky. I mean, there's this talk that, Kobe's 3 minutes, apparently the only 3 minutes I think he spoke during the meeting, his 3 minutes of explaining how he and LaMarcus could become he and Powell Part 2 left LaMarcus underwhelmed. And I know there's a lot of people who are saying, that there goes Kobe screwing up another meeting, shade to Dwight Howard. And whether Kobe put off LaMarcus or not, to a certain degree, it's beside the point, because the real question isn't how Kobe and LaMarcus Aldridge are going to mesh, because Kobe's playing one more season. The question is, how would LaMarcus mesh with Julius Randle or Jordan Clarkson or D'Angelo Russell? And honestly, the answer for the Lakers is we have no idea. I mean, two of these three guys they've never seen play, and Jordan Clarkson had a nice season, but, this jury is still out on him, and the rest of the team is in flux. So there's no infrastructure. And this is really going to be a problem, I think, for the Lakers this offseason as they're looking to bring in free agents. It was definitely an issue for them last offseason, is they have no real basketball to offer because they have no infrastructure.
All right, we're talking to Andy Kamenetsky, ESPN LA. Check him out at 7:10 a.m. in LA. Also, check out the Lando Lakers podcast. And this is an interesting place for the Lakers because they've missed the playoffs, I think, 6 times total since they left Minneapolis, and 2 of those 6 have been in the last 2 seasons. This is a position that they're not familiar with on how to sell the Lakers when you don't have the basketball already in place. How much better can this team get this year to prevent such problems next year?
Well, you know what? I think what they really need to accept is where they are right now. They're in a rebuild, and it's something that the Lakers, they've always had this attitude of, and certainly their fans have always had the attitude of, this is the Lakers. We don't rebuild, we reload. Well, you're at a place where you're actually going to have to rebuild. You can't jump the line the way you always had in the past because there's a new CBA that prevents you from just spending your way towards titles. Being in L.A. doesn't carry the same cachet and importance when it comes to marketing yourself as a player. Between games being nationally televised 3 days a week and social media, you don't have to be in L.A. or New York or Chicago to be seen. I mean, Kevin Durant made a movie while living in Oklahoma City. I mean, it was a bad movie. It barely got released, but it's a movie. Or Dwight Howard, for all the talk about what living in L.A. could bring him, he made his movies while he was in Orlando. So they have to start thinking differently from the way they have in the past and start accepting that they actually have an opportunity to build from the ground up. But the question is, can they actually do that? Because they've never done it before. They've always just been a team that inserts stars because because that's what they do. And it seems like they have a hard time accepting that the world has changed.
Well, we talked about this earlier today also in talking about the Lakers, where there's been the argument that last year they were trying to tank. But as you said, you don't play Kobe Bryant 36 minutes a game if you are trying to tank. Like, did they really think that team last year could be competitive?
I actually think they did. I really do. I think they seriously underestimated just how hard it was going to be to keep Kobe on the court. I think everybody from the front office to Gary Vitti to Kobe himself really didn't take into account the mileage that's been, Kobe's been racking up, the fact that he had 2 season-ending injuries back-to-back, the fact that most players, they can't go this far, that you would even give Kobe that type of a benefit of the doubt speaks to who Kobe is, but also just how impossible this task is. They also didn't think that Julius Randle was going to break his leg in the first game, but, I think they overestimated how much a guy like Carlos Boozer could help. That's the only reason you bring in somebody like Boozer for that team is A, so you can convince fans that, again, the Lakers don't rebuild, we reload, and also because you're terrified of missing the playoffs 2 years in a row. To me, if you're really looking to tank, And bear in mind, this wasn't just missing the playoffs. This is trying to protect a top 5 pick, which is very, very difficult to plan to do. It is very difficult to plan to be the worst team in franchise history. But if you're really looking to throw the season, you don't re-sign a guy like Nick Young, because even though Nick Young's teams generally don't win, he can get hot enough to maybe shoot you into 1 or 2 wins. And every single one of those wins matters if you're actually trying to lose.
All right, we're talking to Andy Kamenetsky. Check the Land O' Lakers podcast. Also follow he and his brother at Cam Brothers, K-A-M Brothers, on Twitter. So looking forward, the D'Angelo Russell pick, how's that going over in L.A.? Because every time I see a Lakers fan, they ask me quickly, like, are you sure we did the right thing?
Actually, you know what? It seems like fans are pretty excited by it. I mean, you know, he's got, I'll say this, I've been around him a couple times. He's got a lot of charisma. I mean, he's got a star quality, and whether he lives up to that or not, you know, remains to be seen. But he's got this really great presence it's a nice combination of confidence but grounded. You know, he killed it in his workouts. You know, hearing guys like Byron Scott mention Chris Paul or Magic Johnson in the same sentence, it's honestly gotten fans excited. And again, I think this is why the Laker front office, I think, actually has an opportunity to sell a rebuild. You know, they've got Jordan Clarkson, who was arguably the biggest surprise of the NBA last year, certainly among rookies. D'Angelo Russell, Julius Randle, who I think everybody thought was going to have a good season until he broke his leg. They've actually got something to sell, but it's so out of character for them to sell anything other than championship or bust. And honestly, as much as Laker fans are entitled and spoiled, they're not stupid. And I think you really could sell this. And if there's one thing the Lakers know how to do, it's market. So I think they really have the opportunity in front of them. It just remains to be seen whether or not they actually have the guts to use it.
Well, the Lakers also have a level of pressure that comes with the television deal they've got, where actually people need to watch on television. And it seems to be the first time ever that there have been questions about whether or not people are going to wind up going to the games. But what's the tenor just around the Lakers at this point in the city?
You know, I mean, I think fans they're still into it. I mean, you got to remember, this is, you know, baked in generational fandom. I mean, Laker fans get a really bad rap for the guys sitting, you know, courtside in the Ed Hardy and the sunglasses and the jewelry. And those guys are tools. You know, they're obnoxious. They deserve to be made fun of. But, you know, this is a cliched expression, but the real fans up in the 300, they're diehard fans. I mean, I spent years bartending around L.A., you know, all over the city, everywhere from Santa Monica to Pasadena. And I can tell you, nothing can bring together a bar crowd of different demographics and different ages and backgrounds and whatever than a Lakers game. I mean, even in some upscale places that I work, everybody is loyal to the Lakers. So, like, the idea that they're all of a sudden going to start losing fans to the Clippers, it's ridiculous. You know, I mean, they actually have to be confident in the brand that they've built up and trust the fact that it actually can last a couple seasons worth of losing. I mean, if any brand can actually withstand it, it's the Lakers.
Andy Kamenetsky. Check him out on ESPN LA 710. Also check out the Land O' Lakers podcast. Follow he and his brother Brian at Cam Brothers. That's K-A-M Brothers on Twitter. My man, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Anytime.
And now, for Geico's edition of Stuff Found in Your Car, we go inside your side door pocket.
Hello, yes, the crumpled receipt with gum in it. From your anniversary dinner, you sprang for expensive wine, your server was Beth. That dinner was a couple $100. Money you could get back if you switched to Geico and saved hundreds of dollars on your car insurance. I bet you'd save that receipt. Frame it even. But really, where did I go wrong? Was it the corkage fee?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com today.
A headline from sportingnews.com. Give Anthony Davis $145 million. Watch him start making three-pointers. So apparently we have a video posted by Anthony Davis of him in the gym working out, including shooting three-pointers. Look, man, if Anthony Davis can shoot three-pointers, then the only place for us to put him is in a comic book. That's it. Like, this is crazy. Like, I'm watching this right now. He's down there dream shaking, spin moves with jumpers off the baseline. His footwork is insane. Like, it is entirely possible that he got this money. It might be, like, way underpaid. Way underpaid. Because, look, if a dude can do the things Anthony Davis does and can start and can make three-pointers, like, I talked about this last week where Candace Hoopus, which is an SB Nation blog about the Timberwolves, was talking about Kevin Garnett and saying basically that this modern big man, like Karl Towns, for example, is an offshoot of the Kevin Garnett evolution. And I say that almost to a degree because Kevin Garnett was so rare at the time, but there still aren't a lot of guys who are 6'10", 6'11", who could play two-guard, which is what Kevin Garnett could legitimately do. Dude, this Anthony Davis, like, this is not – he's not hitting the rim, man. He's just making threes. So let's say Anthony Davis comes back this year and shoots 35% for three-point range. 35%. He's officially the most unfair player on the planet. Like, if Anthony Davis can shoot 35% for three-point range, is he a better player than LeBron James? Because I think it's a fair question to ask. Like, that's not to say that if you put Anthony Davis on the Cleveland Cavaliers and put him in those NBA Finals that he would have been able to carry them in the same way that LeBron was able to carry. Because he's not that guy yet. Like, that's just asking for too much, right? At the same time, if he can do those things, is he not the best player in the NBA? That's what the Pelicans just put all that money on. That could wind up being really, really, really entertaining. All right, 888-729-3776 is the telephone number. LaMarcus Aldridge, it looks like if the Lakers blew it in their presentation, will probably wind up signing with San Antonio. San Antonio will then go into this coming season with Tim Duncan, who's still pretty good, right? Kawhi Leonard locked in for the next 5 years. LaMarcus Aldridge presumably locked in for the next 4 because I don't think they'll be able to offer him 5 unless Portland's trying to do a sign and trade, which I find to be unlikely. You'll have an aging Tony Parker. Manu Ginobili, I mean, okay, he's still playing. Good for him. But if they're going into the next 4 or 5 years with a top 2 of LaMarcus Aldridge and Kawhi Leonard, like, this isn't fair. What the Spurs have been able to do over the course of the last, nearly 20 years. By the way, you know how many times the Spurs have missed the playoffs? Like, since they came into existence, do you know how many times the San Antonio Spurs have missed the playoffs? 4. 4. Yes, 4. And when they've missed the playoffs, who have they drafted in those seasons afterward? Tim Duncan, Sean Elliott, David Robinson, and Alvin Robertson. Like, that's what they've done. I'm sitting here looking at it right now. It's insane. Like, this is since, like, if you go all the way back to the ABA days, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's all they've missed. That's the only times they missed the playoffs. 5 times. And what they've done with Duncan that's been interesting, and keep in mind that the Spurs have won championships under 2 paradigms. Like, after the thing got wild with the Suns, Popovich realized that the way they were playing wasn't going to work, and they were going to have to score some more points, and then they worked around that. And all of that has been around Tim Duncan. What happens in the future with the Spurs fascinates me because as much as I agree that Greg Popovich is a great coach and deserves a ridiculous amount of credit for what he's done, even he has said when people talk about what the system is that the Spurs have, we run the offense through Tim Duncan, we run the defense through Tim Duncan. That's what it has been. Like, even this version of Tim Duncan that we have now, that I think we would all agree is a star, but we wouldn't go so far as to call a superstar. This still feels like the Tim Duncan team. And being the Tim Duncan team means so many things, because one thing being the Tim Duncan team means is you can get guys to give back dough. Like, Manu Ginobili has taken those lesser contracts. I think the Spurs were hoping maybe at some point that Kawhi Leonard would take a lesser contract, but nobody was crazy. He was about to get that bread. But I remember reading a story I think it was in Sports Illustrated, and they were talking about Popovich and why it worked so well for Popovich. And so, like Steven Jackson, for example, it ended bad with Steven Jackson and Greg Popovich, but Steven Jackson still likes Greg Popovich. He just felt like Popovich had an affection for his guys, and Steven didn't feel like he was one of those guys. But Greg Popovich, when the last time Steven Jackson wound up there, he's like, yeah, I can coach Steven Jackson. And part of why he can coach Steven Jackson is the Sports Illustrated article has somebody quoted as saying, if he can mother bleep Tim Duncan, then what are you going to say when he does it to you? Right. So I remember in the Jordan Rules, Sam Smith's book about the 1990-91 Bulls, he talked about how what Phil Jackson had identified in that team was the guy that could take the most, basically. I don't want to use the word abuse because I wasn't there, and that's a loaded term. But the guy that can handle the toughest coaching, he had to identify it, and he identified it as being Horace Grant. And so he treated Horace Grant a certain way because he felt like Horace Grant could take it. He basically did it until Horace Grant broke just to bring it out of him. But he needed that guy that could take it. Tim Duncan's the guy that demonstrated his ability with Popovich to take it. And then once he does that, then you can start talking to other guys about, look, maybe you might want to take a little bit less bread. Why? Because Tim Duncan's over here taking a little bit less bread. Now, I ain't taking less bread because Tim Duncan's taking less bread, but it's a lot easier to sell on those people who are inclined to do something like take less bread. Right? It can work. But the basis of this has been Tim Duncan. I'm going to be very curious to see, even with Greg Popovich being the guy that Greg Popovich is, how that evolves through time. Like, look, every coach has reached a point where people stop listening. Jerry Sloan had a bit of that point where he wound up at the end in Utah, where he'd been there for so long and he's so respected and he goes about it with everybody in the same way. But then it just reached a point where it's time for Jerry Sloan to go. Now, you can put it on Darren Williams if you want, but you notice that nobody's hired Jerry Sloan since. Like, it just reached that point. Being Greg Popovich is a whole lot easier when you've got quite possibly one of the 10 greatest players in the history of the NBA, and you could talk to him like he's the 9th man on the team. I just can't wait to see what this next era of Spurs basketball looks like. That's not making any judgment about whether it'll be good, whether it'll be bad, or anything else. Because, look, Tony Parker, he's getting old now. Like, all those guys that these rings have been based around. David Robinson, long gone. He's been gone for 12 years. Like, that's how long this thing has been going. David Robinson has been gone for 12 years. And one thing to never forget about David Robinson, that year that they won the championship in 1999, we think about Tim Duncan being first-team All-NBA as a rookie. The best player on that team was David Robinson. Now, you go look at the advanced numbers, David Robinson is like one of the most underrated players there's been. But I want to say he was second in win shares per 48 minutes that season. It was David Robinson. David Robinson's been gone for 12 years, man. They won that championship with David Robinson being the guy. They won them with Tim Duncan being the guy. What will they be when somebody else is the guy? And going to sign LaMarcus Aldridge, which I imagine will happen. I can't say guarantee that it will, but I imagine it'll happen. That's the change in the game. And the Spurs are going to be very, very interesting to watch as that proceeds.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones. Weeknights from 9 to 11 Eastern or on demand at ESPNradio.com.